Good evening. You're watching The Big Story with Haryanto Diman. I'm Olivia Quay.
In Parliament today, Health Minister Gan Kim Yong said the government will consider three factors before lifting the circuit breaker measures. First, the number of cases have to remain low. Second, it will assess the global situation. A third, there should be a system to allow the country to open up safely.
Community cases should ideally fall to 0 or single digit daily, with very low numbers of unlinked cases, and not just for one day, but sustained over a period of time. We also need to see a decrease in migrant worker cases. We would review the rate of transmissions in other countries, as well as what they have done to contain the spread. For any reopening of our borders, we are likely to start small and selectively, and to continue to impose a mix of isolation and test requirements to protect ourselves from new imported cases leading to community spread.
Well, companies will have to change their work culture and practices even after circuit breaker measures have been lifted. Minister for National Development Lawrence Wong said this applies to all sectors of the economy.
And that's why MTI and MUM are engaging industry associations, business chambers and firms to help them adapt to these new realities. For example, telecommuting will have to be a default option extended to all staff. And then for those who cannot telecommute, strict safe management practices will have to be implemented. And all of these safeguards must be in place before we can allow workplaces to reopen and allow more people to resume going to work.
Some sectors, such as entertainment and F&B outlets, will have to wait. Religious gatherings may also take some time to resume.
Meanwhile, plans are underway to increase testing capacity from the current 8,000 to 40,000 tests a day. Healthcare facilities will also be ramped up. The number of isolation beds tripled from around 550 in January to 1,500 in May. Another 450 intensive care unit beds can be added to public hospitals by the middle of this month if necessary.
By the end of May, more than 100,000 self-employed people would have benefited from the Self-Employed Person Income Relief Scheme. Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said close to $1 billion in cash is expected to be paid out.
Whether for SEPs or regular employees, finding a job at such times will not be easy. This is why we launched the SG United Jobs Initiative in March. By now, more than 16,000 immediate job vacancies have been made available. This is already higher than our initial target of 10,000 jobs.
And over $7 billion was paid out to employers in April through the Job Support Scheme, with another $4 billion to be paid out this month.
And giving an update on the COVID-19 outbreak in foreign worker dormitories, Mrs. Teo said that the focus now is getting the recovery right to minimize the risk of recurrent transmissions. Mr. Wong also responded to calls from nominated MPs to launch an inquiry into the situation.
Likewise, at the right time, we will comprehensively review this pandemic and our responses. Not just the outbreak in the dormitories, but the entire crisis from start to finish and our overall response, and we will seek to learn and improve. And I have no doubt that we will find many things where we could have done better and many changes we should make to be better prepared the next time.
Well, that's plenty to digest in this Parliament sitting. So let's break it all down with the Straits Times Deputy Political Editor, Royston Sim. So Royston, some circuit breaker measures will be eased from tomorrow. What do the ministers have to say about that, especially when it comes to the public's attitudes regarding the relaxing of these restrictions?
Hi, Olivia. Basically, the message is, that the easing of the measures cannot be taken to signal that people should take it easy and start going out. The message is really that the fight is far from over. That Lawrence Wong said that this entire battle against COVID-19 is really a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we are not even at the halfway mark. So I think they really want to take pains to stress that people should not take it to mean that they can start going out, that the situation is getting better, because I think their point is that even if the number of cases have come down, all it takes is one single case to spark off a new cluster and the transmission could start again. So people have to be very careful, and we are far from being out of the woods. And I think the other thing that Gan said was even though the Health Minister Gan Kim Yong said was that even after the measures are progressively lifted, from June 1st, assuming that happens, this will have to be done in a very phased and very calibrated manner, so that you take it step by step and you make sure that at each point, the number of cases, or there are no new cases of infection.
And what updates did the ministers, specifically Ministers Gan and Wong, give about the status of Singapore's battle against COVID-19?
So Minister Gan basically said that the circuit breaker measures appear to be working. Said the number of new community cases have come down in the past week. I think it was from more than about 31 in the past week to about 11. And likewise, the number of unlinked community cases have come down. So he is saying that the circuit breaker measures so far appear to be having an effect. And for Minister Lawrence Wong, he basically set out a roadmap, if you will, for how we should reopen, and basically, like what I mentioned earlier, how it has to be done in a very sort of phased and calibrated manner. How, when people go back to work, telecommuting will still have to be a default option, and for those that are for companies or workers that are unable to do this, there will have to be safe management practices in place. For example, workers won't be able to gather, at pantries. They should adopt safe distancing measures at all times. And Mr. Wong also talked about how there will be a nationwide testing strategy that will be adopted, and also how the government will tap on technology to sort of help it with contact tracing. So that's the Trace Together app, and also how the safe entry application will be made mandatory for all workplaces from May 12th. And I also want to mention Manpower Minister Jocelyn Teo. What she said in a ministerial statement was that the situation in the 43 purpose-built dormitories, which together house about 200,000 workers, has largely stabilized. And she is saying that it's the situation in your factory-converted dormitories, which I think together have about 95,000 foreign workers. These are smaller dormitories. How the situation there, and in your construction temporary quarters, the situation there is more mixed, and it's sort of harder to get under control.
Right. Well, very comprehensive, Royston. But did anything else stand out for you from today's Parliament sitting?
In her update, Mrs. Teo gave a figure. She said that under the current rules, about 20 dormitory operators have been taken to task each year for breaching rules with regard to the housing of foreign workers, and that's quite a significant number, because in total there are 35 dormitory operators, so that's more than half. So that kind of stood out for me. And the other thing was Minister Wong's response to the NMPs, Walter, Tessera, and Anthea Ong, which I think we flagged earlier, about their calls for a commission of inquiry. There's something that has also been floated online in some quarters, and his response is basically that we are still in the heat of the battle, and when things are concluded, as with previous episodes, the government will do a thorough review, and there'll be time to look at what went wrong, what areas need to be improved. Although he didn't commit to holding a commission of inquiry or committee of inquiry, so what form the review will take, and when that will happen, those remain open questions.
Right. Well, thanks very much, Royston. We've been speaking to Royston Sim, who's Deputy Political Editor at the Straits Times. And for all Parliament updates, you can visit straitstimes.com.
In other news, the Health Ministry has confirmed 573 new COVID-19 cases as of noon today. Among these are 5 Singaporeans and permanent residents.
Migrant workers living in dormitories continue to make up the bulk of the remaining cases, and the full breakdown of the new cases will be released later today. Singapore now has a total of 18,778 cases.
For the first time in 26 years, the annual Great Singapore Sale will not be taking place this year. The Singapore Retailers Association, which organizes the GSS, said it will take a break this year in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The association added it will return next year, both offline and online.
Meanwhile, in another first, Singaporeans will get to experience wet market shopping online during this circuit breaker period. 6 stalls from the popular Tekka market in Serangoon will be hawking their fresh produce, meats and vegetables over a live stream on Facebook tomorrow. Customers can interact with sellers as they would in the actual wet market in the comments. Organizer Infocom Media Development Authority told the Straits Times that the initiative could be expanded to include more stalls and other markets depending on the response to tomorrow's event.
A Singapore woman who was filmed not wearing a mask at Shunfu Market and engaging passers-by in a heated argument is under investigation for voluntarily causing hurt, causing public nuisance as well as breaching safe distancing measures. Videos of the altercations have been circulating online since yesterday afternoon. In one of the clips, she claims to be a sovereign and that the police have no say over her. Let's now go to Dylan Ang for what's making headlines around the world.
Thanks, Arianto and Olivia. Across the Causeway, Malaysia began easing its COVID-19 restrictions, cutting short its partial lockdown by a week with the resumption of most economic sectors from today. But this comes as its daily infection numbers snapped back to triple digits after he had been falling. Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin announced the high-stakes move last Friday, saying that it was a crucial step to resuscitate the ailing domestic economy that was losing 2.4 billion ringgit daily. It is also estimated to contract by as much as 8.5% this year. Meanwhile, Russia reported more than 10,000 new coronavirus cases on Saturday, its 4th record single-day increase. The highest daily rise brings the total number of cases there to more than 134,000, the 7th highest in the world. President Vladimir Putin has extended a nationwide non-working period until May 11th. Moving to the US, the Food and Drug Administration approved emergency use of the first drug, which appears to help some COVID-19 patients recover faster. Remdesivir is the first FDA-approved treatment for hospitalized patients with severe disease, such as those experiencing breathing problems that require supplemental oxygen or ventilators. While the drug has been said to not be a cure, many have been optimistic and are considering it to be a milestone in the global search for a vaccine. That's it for our global updates. Back to you.
Migrant workers are the backbone of many economies in Asia and Middle East. They also provide a vital source of income for their families back home. But the pandemic has hit these workers hard as some have lost their jobs or faced salary cuts. And some struggle with just trying to get their next meal on the table.
Well, the Straits Times correspondents around the region talked to these migrant workers to hear their stories. And today we have Indonesia correspondent Linda Yulisman, who's in Jakarta, to tell us more. So, Linda, the migrant workers in Singapore have been housed in alternative accommodations to safeguard their well-being from the virus. Their meals are also taken care of, but workers in other countries in the region don't have the same measures in place. So you spoke to some Indonesian workers in Malaysia who have stopped working due to the country's movement control order, and it's the same situation for many of the Bangladeshi workers there as well. So what are the struggles that they shared with you?
Yes, in general, the migrant workers in Malaysia I talked to are struggling to meet both ends meet, and they feel very distressed. Daily wage workers such as construction laborers lost their jobs because the Malaysia's movement control order implemented since March 18 has halted a lot of projects. Now they can only eat everything they have, such as plain rice or noodles. They also cannot pay their monthly rent or send money to their families back home. The situation is even more worse for undocumented workers as they also fear being arrested. And right now, most of them are depending on the food aid from labor rights groups such as Migrant Care and Tenaga Nita, and also Indonesian Embassy in Kuala Lumpur, and also consulate generals across Malaysia. Another concern is about the improper housing. Many of them share houses with up to 4 people in one room, so this situation may increase the risk of infection.
Now, Linda, let's move over to the situation in the Philippines. Over the weekend, the Philippines also shut its airports, leaving the Filipinos working abroad stranded and unable to return home. What's the latest on the situation there?
Well, many Indonesian migrant workers also face a similar situation. They are now stranded abroad and cannot return home. A lot of them actually have no choice except going home because their work contracts have expired and their employers do not want to have extensions. A number of them, however, have managed lately to arrive in Jakarta and other cities where there are airports serving international flights. But actually, they cannot return to their hometowns because the local airports shut and other transportation modes do not operate as Indonesian capital and some regions implement social distancing measures. Also, the government has banned the massive exodus ahead of Hari Raya Idul Fitri that will fall on May 25. Migrant worker activists have voiced their concerns over this issue and have urged the Indonesian government to facilitate the return of migrant workers, especially those losing their jobs abroad, to return to Indonesia and their respective hometowns, while also still applying the appropriate health procedures such as 14-day quarantine. Actually, there have been around 89,000 Indonesian migrant workers returning home, and another 16,000 will likely do so, according to reports cited by Indonesian President Joko Widodo this morning.
Well, Linda, we talked about the situation in Malaysia as well as the Philippines. So what are the authorities in the countries doing to help the workers? We understand that embassies and community-based organizations have extended as much help as they can to the workers, but are these measures actually making some dents?
Yeah, the embassies and community-based organizations have provided food aid to migrant workers to help them survive day by day. However, the aid has so far only covered a little number of migrant workers. For instance, in Malaysia, there are estimated 3.3 million Indonesian workers, and from the figure, only 1.2 million are documented. The embassy has so far distributed more than 200,000 packages of table food. So the basic issue here is how to speed up the food aid distribution to reach many others. And it is also important to note that the aid provided for these migrant workers are minimal, comprising only rice, noodles, canned fish that can last in just a few days. It's sufficient to keep the migrant workers out of hunger, but they really need more sustainable aid in the future.
Now, Linda, so on one hand, we have the migrant workers in Malaysia who are, facing some struggles. The migrant workers in Hong Kong, they seem to face a better situation there, which we talked about earlier as well with the case in Malaysia. Could you tell us more about the situation in Hong Kong?
Yeah, actually, things are starting to look up for the workers in Hong Kong as activities gradually return to normal in contrast with many other countries. They are resuming work as usual, but they actually face another looming threat, the fear of being fired. Some of their employers are now talking about the bad economic situation in Hong Kong after the COVID-19 pandemic, and some others have even been fired by their companies. As a result, the employers try to cut their household spending and they dismiss their domestic workers. A number of Indonesian migrant workers are facing this situation right now, so they have no alternative except to return home because there's no certainty of finding a new job soon. And in this case, I think the government must facilitate their return.
Well, thank you so much, Linda, for the insights. And that was our Indonesia correspondent, Linda Yulisman, who shared with us the struggles faced by migrant workers in the region. Let's go over to Dylan once more.
While it's a trying time for everyone amid the global pandemic, there are those who are looking to lift the mood. Here's a look at some feel-good stories. Rock legend Mick Jagger and actor Will Smith were among dozens of stars who took part in a 4-hour concert yesterday to raise funds for the battle against the coronavirus in India. I for India also featured top names like India's cricket captain Virat Kohli, actress Priyanka Chopra and actor Shah Rukh Khan. The live-streamed event paid tribute to frontline workers battling the pandemic, with all proceeds going to charity. India's 1.3 billion people have been under lockdown since March 25th. More than 42,000 cases have been confirmed in the country. Back home, last week, a 102-year-old woman became Singapore's oldest recovered COVID-19 patient. Madam Yap Lei Hong was discharged from Tan Tock Seng Hospital last Friday. She was among the 16 residents and staff at the Lee Amoy Old Age Home who had caught the virus. Born during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, Madam Yap is among the rare centenarians worldwide battling COVID-19. The oldest person to recover from the virus is a 107-year-old Dutch woman.
Well, thanks very much, Dylan. And those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com.
If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, do tap on the red subscribe button down below. If you're watching on YouTube, of course. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Kwe. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.